Dysfunctional vet. This is the pipe size that he selected. It's 2.5 inches. The gentleman decided that what he was going to do was go with 5/8 inch. Instead of having 9 lines, he'll actually have 18, and they're going to be staggered on the 1/2 inch centers after the 1 inch centers are drilled. So he'll have twice the volume of the 5/8 as originally designed. The tape measure is sitting at 40 inches. The cap, which is the little white spot right beside the orange tape measure, is the cap for that, and it is 1 3/4 inch deep. That could be cut down since the pipe isn't holding any kind of pressure. Cut it down to say 1 inch, and there's no reason for that because the man has 6 feet of water inside the well that's going to be filled in. So we can put that cap on full strength. There'll be no holes in the cap as such, and then the holes will start 1 inch above the cap and will continue along. So adding the 1 3/4 inch and then the inch, we have more than enough length of pipe and depth of water to pull all that in. And again, there's no problem if the water level dropped a little bit because his pump is going to be set down here well below the 3-foot level. Let me show you how I'm going to do this, and then we'll move on to the next step. So I'm about to put the cap on. I'm going to be using if I can grab it, a dry erase pen to make my lines on the PVC. That way I can wipe them off with some alcohol or some water before I put it down in and not use a Sharpie. I could use a Sharpie, it wouldn't be a problem, but the dry erase will be nice and clean. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the cap on. I'm going to tap it into place using a hammer. I'll make all my markings for the first line. I'll drill that, then I'll rotate my pipe, make my markings for the next one, and drill that, and I'll show you the completed processes as I get them done. Now I'll put my markings on here. I'm going to draw a 36-inch line, and then I'll come back and mark where the inches are on it. I'm going to do this one at a time so that I don't end up erasing my lines. This is my 1 inch. Unfortunately, it's not marking as well on this. The next thing is to drill the pieces. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start on this side over here, and I'm going to drill pilot holes using a 1/8 inch drill and work my way up to the top here. As soon as I get that done, then I'll come back and I'll bore with a larger hole. The reason for using a small drill, and I thought about using a 1/16, but they break too easy, is because this is a round surface, and this way it will dig in a little quicker and it'll give me that start pilot hole. Whereas a large drill has a larger point on it and they tend to flex. And I'm not using a drill press, I'm hand drill. So I'll show you this one line partially, and then I'll show you the completed project. And I'll just keep doing that till I get to the top, and when I get finished, then I'll come back and I'll drill it with the 1/4 inch drill, which will remove, this is a 1/8, I'll be drilling with the 1/4 inch, which will be removing a 1/4 inch of pipe, and then I'll come back with a 5/8. Alright, you can clearly see the holes that I pre-drilled. You can see that the line is pretty much rubbed off down here at the bottom, although as we go up, the line is not rubbed off as badly. In order to save time and not be changing the drill bit every 5 minutes, I'm going to make my 8 lines, pre-drill my holes, and then I'll come back and I'll change to the 1/4 inch drill each one of them, and then I'll go to the larger 5/8. Alright, I've drilled my holes now. These are 9/32, and the guy that lives up the way there stopped by. He was actually headed somewhere else, and just stopped by to see how his screen was coming. And I was just finishing these holes, and he decided that these are big enough. So I will take a rat tail file. I'll clean out the burrs that you see. Let me zoom in on one right here. I'll clean all that out. Again, it's to remove resistance. You notice I've also removed the cap. And after I've got all the burrs on the inside cleaned out, and I'll use a stiff brush on a stick for that. As soon as I do that, then I'll be ready to flush this piece of pipe. The hole's basically cleaned out. We're ready to put the cap on the bottom. We're going to use wet set PVC cement. With the cap now glued on, we can verify that our first hole is about 1 inch away, which leaves us with this 1 inch area here in order to secure our stainless steel mesh down. There are 30 full holes down the length. The guy I'm working for, when he saw how big these holes were, said that's enough, and he decided that he only wanted rows of 8, not 9, because he just thought it would save on time because he's in a hurry to get it done. So now the next thing to do is to cut the stainless steel mesh. Although I worked the math many times, I rolled out a piece of paper. You see the pencil marks? That's 9 inches from one side to the other, which agreed with the math I did. So this will be 10 inches so that I have an overlap, not a seam that I have to close down, and then I'll come back and pop rivet this into place. Here's my screen wire. Again, this is number 60, and as you look at it, it looks like just a sheet of paper or something like that. I measure out my 10 inches. That gives me a 1 inch overlap. And I make my mark right there. And I'll do this multiple times down the length of it. Get this flat. Anyway, I'll do this the entire length of it. Then I'll put my ruler down, and then I'll draw my line, and I'll have a much straighter line than if I just put 2 points and draw a line in between. So I'll show you that in one moment. I've got my line drawn. I take my ruler, I set my ruler down on this, get it aligned for the length of it. There we go. And I draw my line. Keep this right where it's at. Come up here. There's my line. As you can see, sometimes it's a little high, sometimes it's a little low. But this gives me a much more accurate line than just putting a line here and putting a line down there. And a pair of shears. I started cutting this, and then I realized the camera wasn't running. And some people want to see the actual cutting process done. This is cutting very close to the way a heavier cloth would cut. You could think of this as a heavy fabric Now, due to the length of this, I'm going to cut from the other side. Alright, I'm going to pull this out, just do a real quick test to see how it lines up on it. Stated, the circumference is 9 inches. I cut this 10 inches so that it would align and wrap around. Let's see how it does. Although I'm having trouble getting the slack out of it, it aligns real good. I have plenty of overlap. After I turned the camera off, after cutting this wire, I ended up getting stabbed. Let's see if I can get you to see it. See these wires sticking out? They're very small. Like 18 gauge, 24 gauge needles. Anyway, I got stabbed and cut. The thing is covered now. It's not a real good fit down here. I got to work that. I kind of sized it on, and I used electrical tape to hold it in place as I got it on there. Got the 3 links. You can see the holes through here. This is a single layer material. As I turn it, you can tell that right here I'm between the holes, and as I come up here, I continue to be behind the holes but slightly covering one of them. That may have to do with the fact that this is slightly out of whack right here. My proposal to get this to fit where it needs to go is to start kind of to the outside of this overlap, put a hole in, put my pop rivet in, and work my way all the way around, keeping this very tight and pulling this in as much as I can against the tape in order to get it to square up with this. And I'll probably slide it just a little bit because I won't have to worry too much about this overlapping that. Then as I come around, I'll put a pop rivet right here through the top of this, which will cinch these 2 pieces down. Once I have this in and everything's real tight on the casing, then I'll work my way up every other in between the inches as I go up. So let's say that I put 4 or 5 down here, then I'll use 33 going up, and then 4 or 5 at the top, and that should cinch it up pretty good. I also have some JB Weld 15-minute epoxy, which I'll be sealing around the bottom here, and then I'll be sealing up these seams right here just to help keep particulate matter past this seam and keep it from getting to the inside of the well screen. And then I'll put it on the top also. The reason for putting it at the top is just to help seal that and also to help strengthen it against the epoxy. And the PVC. According to this works well on PVC. For people whose hands are not real strong, you can get one of these little vises. You put it on here like so, like this, and then you can squeeze the epoxy into a mixing cup. I have these sticks, got these at Walmart, but you can get them at Hobby Lobby or other places, and I'll mix my epoxy once I put it in there to seal everything up. And I'll be using the stirring stick to dab it on here. These are 1/8 inch pop rivets. This first one right here, as you see, has a little bit of a dimple sticking out, and I wondered what the problem with that was. So I got to looking at my drill, and it turned out the bit, which was brand new, never been used before, was bent right at the tip. And I knew there was a problem going into it. I just couldn't figure out what it was because I didn't stop to investigate. I replaced the drill bit with one that wasn't bent, and I got a nice clean pop rivet. It's anchored in there real good and tight, and on the back side you can just barely tell that it's in there. So it's not coming to the inside of this where it would create any kind of a problem for a piece of tubing coming down to draw water up. If you have rough surfaces inside here and there's some banging from wind blowing on the pump or something like that, you can actually cause a hole to form in the tubing, and then the tubing has to be replaced. So this way we can minimize that. So now it's time to actually do the K-Dog has just come back. There he is. He's not all wet, so he didn't go down to the pond. The pond is on somebody else's property. Last time he went swimming, he went down to my neighbor's house and got in the man's pool. He's got a real nice big pool where him and his family go swimming. And K-Dog decided that he would just go down there and hang out. The guy was not happy about that. We're going to start by drilling a hole and putting our pop rivet in. Again, if you can see it, there's a line of holes here, there's a line of holes here, and what I'm going to try to do is run these pop rivets on the other side of these holes right through this 1-inch margin here. If I had to, and I could just turn this like that and have a little wider margin to work with. So we might just do that. So let's see how this works. First pop rivet in. There we go. I need to get a small brush so that I don't end up getting zapped by a piece of metal again. Let's see how this works. Got to shove it in good. We're on there tight. Nice and clean. We'll pick up that piece of metal before I run over it. There's my first pop rivet. Now I will turn this thing. I'll make sure that the wire is nice and tight, and I'll put one in right back over here. I'm going to have to brace this so that it can't roll. I'm going to have to go get something else to brace it so it won't roll. I will be back. I'm using a pipe vise to hold the pipe while I drill these holes because the pipe has a little bit of a bend in it and it's trying to roll. I got this from Northern Tool. I'm not sure what I paid, but it's worth its weight. If you don't have one and you are a do-it-yourself or you work with pipes and stuff like that, this is the only way to hang on to pipes from 1/2 inch to larger so that you can thread them, cut them, do whatever you need. So we'll go back to drilling these holes. This will be the last one I'll show you on film, and then when I start up the seam, I'll go back and start recording again. I drill my hole and lose the bit. It's a bit embarrassing. This drill has seen better days. Very carefully get the cuttings away from it. Tighten that up again. If I ever meet anybody who tells me they've never had a bit come out of their drill, I'm going to wonder if they've done a lot of work. Shove this in good and tight, down hard. Draw up. We'll draw up again. left a little bit of a pin there. We'll work that later. But that is how I'm doing it. If you look, the one that has the little dimple on it, this is the outside of the screen. I'm going to move up to the holes just on the other side of that, and I'm going to put a few pop rivets down the length of that. That is the start of the wrap, and then the other piece overlaps it. The reason for doing that is as I pull it tight, it'll keep that from slipping, and I'll be able to get a much tighter screen fit all the way around. So again, I'm going to move from here to right up here, and I'm going to put pop rivets maybe about every 5 inches or 6 inches down the length of this thing, so that as I pull it tight and put it down, I'll have a nice patent fit. What you have here is you have the outside row of rivets. That's the bottom piece of the wire. And when the wire comes around, now I'm starting to rivet down the length of it. You can see I have the bottom rivet here, and then I'm starting to rivet up the length of it as I pull the slack out of it so that it wraps tight on the pipe. And then I punch it down. Something you need to do when you're drilling these holes is you need to have your rivet ready to go if you're working by yourself, because you don't want to lose the slack once you've drilled the hole, and it's difficult to load a pop rivet into a rivet gun one-handed. I'm just getting started, but this is going very quickly. And there's my tie down using the pipe vise to hold my pipe so that I can work on it. I wish I'd done this earlier. This piece right here is part of a brake drum and a piece of heavy-duty angle iron, and I use that when I'm working with pipe. Normally I'm working with oil-filled pipe, and that's 2 3/8 inches, and I lay it in there and then I can work with it. I don't normally have to use a pipe wrench with that, because even if it has a bit of a bend, I don't concern myself with it. Alright, I've bradded up, and you can see the brads here and here, there and there, and I've put some JB weld on it. Turned out to be a whole lot thicker and a whole lot creamier than what I thought. I'm using some little plastic. I am using plastic mouthwash cups to put the stuff on here. I've got to let this dry, and then I'm going to finish the rest of this up here, and after I do that, then I'll start turning it and putting it on the top and the bottom, as you see down here. The stuff doesn't really drip. It surprised me. For as creamy and as liquidy as it is, where you put it, it tends to stay. 15 minutes later, I have epoxied the back side of it, bottom and top. Doesn't look pretty, but nobody's going to see it. The tape is still on there. I'll leave the tape on here for about 1 hour. Give everything plenty of time to set up. And then I'll remove the tape, and I will epoxy the areas where the tape was. But as you can see, the screen, you can see how white this is where there's no screen, and how mottled the color is where the screen is at. It's a very fine mesh. It is a very fine mesh, and it'll let lots of water get in. Obviously it's at night. This shows my seam. Here's a spot where I've got to come back and put the stuff down now that the tape has been removed. But this is what it looks like as far as the tubing. You can see it's all full of holes. Now we have that little bitty hole right there. That's from a pop rivet where the rivet itself came out. We'll plug that, and it'll all be sealed up.